Hey everybody, welcome and thanks for clicking on the stream. I figured nobody's really done a comprehensive overview of Star Wars Unlimited just yet. I wanted to give you a little bit of a background about myself before we start. I started playing card games in '94, roughly, with Magic the Gathering. So I've been playing on and off since for a very long time. Other games that I've played are Young Jedi, where I was a state runner up for my state of Connecticut. And I also was the last regional champion. I don't know if you can see that good or not, but that's something that they gave me for being the last regional champion. Well, the regional champion, I should say. So um, I played a couple of Star Wars games, but my favorite was probably Young Jedi. I did dabble a little bit in the original TCG, and there was another one. I can't remember the name of it for some reason. But um, so what drove me to Star Wars Unlimited? I became disenchanted with Magic, and essentially just didn't like the direction that they were going. And I'm not here to trash them or anything like that, but the universes beyond, allowing Final Fantasy into standard, into the Magic lore, just seemed a little bit odd to me. Um, I can't imagine a game like Star Wars, for example, allowing Gandalf to be in it. It just breaks the immersion for me. It's my own personal choice. There's a lot of other factors to it. The price of boxes, for example, for Magic became pretty high. But again, I'm not really here to rant about that. Just want to go over Star Wars. We'll go over the gameplay. We're going to go over cards, the rarities, the different types. We're going to try to cover everything. This is mostly going to be for players that have some type of knowledge of other card games and gives you a good direction as far as where to go. So, what I'm going to start off with, my first impressions of this game. So coming from Magic, coming from Young Jedi, coming from Star Wars TCG, there was another one, like I said, I can't remember. They used digital art for Star Wars. My first impressions of this game, well, actually, I'm not going to say first my impressions of the game in general. This is probably the best card game that I've ever played. And I know that's a big statement to say, but I genuinely believe that. I think there's a lot of strategy involved in it. There's a lot of thinking. You have to think well ahead of time, and if you do decide to pick this game up, you'll see that as well too. There's a lot of thinking involved, a lot of extra steps in other games, but it's also simple at the same time. The strategy is the difficult part of it. Um, do you need to know Star Wars to play this game? No, I don't. I don't think that you need to know it. It would be helpful if you had some knowledge of it. One of the reasons why they called this game Star Wars Unlimited was because they wanted it to be unlimited possibilities, my understanding, where basically anything could happen, where you could have something from one story happening against characters from a different story. This is supposed to be more of a your own universe type of thing where an interaction may happen potentially. So, one thing that I want to recommend jumping into this, there are two-player starters for the first three sets of the game that were very good, especially for newer players that were just starting off. And I really missed that, but it was changed to spotlight decks for sets 4 and 5, which are individually sold. Whereas the first three sets, you'd have a light side deck and a dark side deck, heroism versus villainy. And the decks would be completely pre-made and ready to go. Now the new ones, they're a little bit more competitive, where you could probably play with them right out of the box, but you don't have them both. So I don't know, it's a little bit of a mix for me. I think the card quality is much better in the spotlight decks, but I do miss being able to get both decks and sit down with a friend and play them. I started off with the set one 2-player starter. Myself and my brother, we sat down and played. We got the rules and we learned them, and it was a lot of fun. And that's one of the things that I really liked about this is that I'm basically starting from scratch on a new game and discovering the world all over again, just like I did when Magic was around. So I recommend starting off with either a 2-player starter, or if you can get the Spotlight decks. The decks are already made, they're complete, they're ready to go. Um, so that's my recommendation to start off with. The starters are definitely very solid. They're pre-made, as I said, they're ready to go. Deck details. This game is a minimum of 50 cards, but there's some really interesting deck design where some of the cards allow you to break the rules of deck creation, which I'll go over later on when we get to bases. For this game, it requires one base and one leader. We're going to go over all of that later, but essentially those two things are going to determine the cards that you can play without paying any penalties, essentially. And so from there, we're gonna kind of go over everything. Some of the things that you want to have near, I recommend, is the playmat. You're going to see one in one of the captured images coming up here in just a moment that puts everything into perspective. The ground arena, the space arena, where everything goes. It's very handy. Some of the sources that we're going to go over later, some of the online places you can get stuff are LGSs. If you have one that sells the cards, will have these playmats as well too. Different zones. This game has 2 combat arenas. Unlike a lot of other areas, there's a ground arena, there's a space arena. There's a separate zone for your leader and base. We've got an area for your deck and your discard pile. So we're going to go over some of the things to start. So what we're seeing here on the screen right now is what comes with the 2-player starters. And just kind of to skip over, to get past some of the 2-player starters versus the Spotlight decks, there's 5 total sets that have been made so far. Spark of Rebellion was the first set, followed by Shadows of the Galaxy, then Twilight of the Republic, then jump to Lightspeed, and Legends of the Force is the newest set, set 5. So Spark of Rebellion, Shadows of the Galaxy, and Twilight of the Republic uses 2-player starter that we're looking at here. This is the first one from Spark of Rebellion, Luke Skywalker deck and a Darth Vader deck. You get them both. And so some of the stuff that I recommend is coming from this. Whether you choose to do this with the Spotlight decks, it's okay. You're going to get all the same stuff either way. So what are you going to get? So if you get the 2-player starters, which are a little bit older, they're going to have 2 decks where you can sit down with a friend and play. They're going to be completely constructed for you. You don't have to do anything. There's also going to be some tokens in here, token upgrades they're called, and we're going to go over those with a little bit more detail later. Over here we're going to see, well, I'm not sure if the mouse is coming up, so apologies, I haven't used this setup in a while, but these number tokens on the top here are basically damage tokens. You can use dice if you prefer. There's really no difference as long as you mark the damage that you're taking. To the right of that, it says Star Wars Limited. That's our initiative token. That is something that I've never seen in another game before, and I really like that. To the right of that, these X tokens are your epic action tokens, and it just basically is going to denote when your leader takes an epic action. Okay, so leaders. Each deck is going to have one leader unit. We're looking at the back side of it here, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what they look like. On the left, we've got Luke Skywalker, obviously, and on the right, we've got Darth Vader. And this is the leader side. This is what you're going to have with your leader, I would say most of the game. And this is going to start in play. There'll be a screenshot coming later. That's going to explain a little bit more where they're positioned. But if you take a look at this one, we see some things on here where it says action. Every leader has some kind of ability that it can do in the game. And again, we're going to go over these in a little bit more detail later on as we go through the game. This is our base. So you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner here, there's a number. We're seeing 30. That's how many hit points your base is going to have. And so basically, that's how much damage you can take before you lose the game. There are other ways to win the game as well here too. Here's the playmat that I was speaking of. And they're very good as far as outlining where everything needs to go, all the different places. On the left, you see the space units. On the right, we'll see the ground units. There's two different combat arenas that we have here. You also see in the center, we've got the base and the leader, spot for the initiative token, resources, we'll go over and explain that, and a spot for your deck and discard pile. So what you're going to want to do to start the game is you're going to randomly determine who goes first. So I would say in most cases, people will just roll dice to see who goes first. Generally, what I've done in almost every game is to roll 2d6, and then your opponent rolls 2d6. We take the highest roll, and the player that gets the highest gets to choose if they want to go first or if they want to go second. That player is going to get the initiative token. So more on that in just a little bit, but basically it just signifies the player who's going first in that round. These are some more of the tokens. The top are going to be the cardboard tokens that come with all of your two-player starters. The bottom ones are plastic ones that you can buy. Most LGSs or local game stores are going to have both of the bottom options here. All right, I'm going to pause this screenshot here for now. We're going to get into that in just a moment. After we randomly choose, you're going to take your deck. We're going to just assume that we're going to be using the starter deck or the spotlight decks. What you're going to want to do is you're going to shuffle your deck, let your opponent cut the deck if they'd like to. You get a chance to cut their deck or shuffle their deck. And then you're going to put that in your deck spot. Each player is going to draw 6 cards. You can look at those cards, but you obviously don't want to share the information of what's in your hand with your opponent. You do have the ability to mulligan once. This is going to start with the player who's going first and has the initiative token. And the way mulligans work for this game is if you look at your hand, you have an opportunity to take your hand, shuffle it back in. Again, give your opponent the opportunity to cut your deck or shuffle it, and then you would draw 6 cards. Mulligans can only be done once in this game, so once per match, of course. And so once the person that has the initiative token chooses if they want to mulligan, then the opposite player gets to choose if they want to mulligan. And then from there, we're going to just start up the game. The player with the initiative token is going to go first. And one of the cool things about this game is you're going to take 2 cards from your hand and put them face down as a resource. If you have any experience with Magic, these work similar to lands. And if you're not familiar with Magic, that's okay. They basically allow you to pay for the cost of the cards that we're going to play. So if you have 1 resource down, it's going to start off in the vertical position, in this position essentially. And to denote that you have exhausted it or used it, you're just going to turn it horizontally like so. So you start with your 2 resources down. You're going to have 4 cards left. And we're going to get into the setup. This is roughly how the playmat's going to look. On the bottom, we see Luke with the base that's associated with this player's deck. And then they have their deck off to the side. And again, I just took a picture here of my friend playing where the deck is going to go. Generally, as long as you have a spot that's okay for you, it doesn't matter where you put your deck or your discard pile. Okay, so I'm going to leave the picture here for now. We're going to get into units in just a moment. From here, we're going to jump into the action phase. Star Wars Unlimited is broken up into 2 phases. and it's the action phase and the regroup phase. The action phase is where you get to play cards from your hand. The regroup phase we'll go over as we get to it, but essentially is where you have a chance to refresh your hand and get more cards to play with. Things that you can do in the action phase: you can play a unit. This is a unit that we're looking at here, and I'll explain it in just a moment. We're going to go over the traits in just a moment as well, triggered abilities. You also have the ability to play events, which are things that happen once and they're discarded, and upgrades. So before we dive into anything further, I'm going to explain this unit. Okay, I don't have it in place. So essentially what we would do is the number in the upper left-hand corner is how much this particular unit cost, Alliance X-Wing. You notice it's got 2 where the gold is, up in the upper left-hand corner. And beneath that, we've got an aspect. And I'll go over the aspects in just a moment here. Below that, we see in the red, the number 2. That's how much power this unit has. And on the opposite side, we've got the blue 3. That's its hit points. That's how much damage this unit can take. Now in the middle, we're going to look at traits. This is a rebel vehicle fighter. And also, if we look at the top, you see where the gold 2 is. If we look just to the right of that, it says unit, and then to the right of that is space. So on the next picture, you see over here on the upper left, we have a section where you can put the space units. So once we pay for our unit here, again, remember this costs 2. This is what our initial board is going to look like. We're going to have our 2 resources located underneath Luke. Again, those are vertically. And you're going to just turn them horizontal, one at a time, and that will allow you to pay to put your Alliance X-Wing into play. And once you've done that, it's going to go into the Space Units arena on the left-hand side. And one of the things about units being deployed in this game is that they enter exhausted, meaning they enter horizontal. And for reference, they're going to start the game in this orientation. Okay, so now that you've done that, essentially you're going to have your unit. Now, the turn order for Star Wars Unlimited is like chess. If you've ever played chess before, generally it means that you would go and then your opponent would go and then you go. Everybody takes one action at a time, and we'll go over what different actions do as we move along here. We're just going to go over some of the basic things as far as what can be played and how they're played. Once we get our unit into play, let's just assume that for this example, we're going to be the player that goes first, that has the initiative token. And we can see that over here on the far left, the Star Wars token. On the left-hand side, just to the left of where the resources are. Let's assume that we're going to be going first. So we're going to pay our 2 resources, again, turn those horizontally, and then we're going to take our X-Wing and we're going to put that into play. Just want to see if I got a screenshot. There it is. Okay. And that's roughly what it's going to look like. So now we've done that. Now our opponent will have an opportunity to play something. So if they've got a unit that they'd like to play, they can do the same thing. So they can essentially pay any number of resources and play a unit. Now, one thing that I wanted to mention is that when you're making a mulligan decision, generally you want to have at least one card that costs 1 or 2 so that you have some kind of a play to start the game with. Otherwise, you're going to just have to pass, and once you get to the next turn and you play another resource, then you can play something for 3. But generally, you want to mulligan if you don't have something that costs 1 or 2. Okay, let me go back. All right, so we're going to assume that everything went into play. I'm going to show you a couple of other cards here. So in the middle, we've got a card called Repair. This is called an event, and all events have an effect. And then once you play them, they go immediately to your discard pile. I have a screenshot up here. I just want to jump ahead to it. So this is an example. Okay, so Once you pay your 1 for repair, it's going to go directly into the discard pile. Upgrades, which in this example is going to be Luke's lightsaber. This is things that attach to units that are in play. And these also have a cost, they have traits, and we'll go over that in just a moment as well too. Okay, so ground units versus space units. So we saw this in the screenshot here, okay? One thing to note is the unit on the left, the Counselor Security Force, says unit ground. If we look at the very top, see where the gold number 4 is the cost for this unit. To the right of that, it says unit, so we know that's a unit. And to the right of that, it says the word ground. So, and the example here, we're going to put that unit, once we're able to do so, in the arena on the right side. Units in space normally cannot fight units on the ground, and units on the ground generally can't fight units in space. So they're two separate places to do combat. It adds another layer of strategic combat, essentially. We've gone over the Alliance X-Wing here as well too, but I just wanted to note, if you look here in the middle of this Consular Security Force, we'll also see traits here. This says Rebel and Trooper. If you look in the middle of the card between the 3 and the 7, that's going to come into play later. So some leaders or some cards that you have are going to potentially be based on those traits. In the card text, sometimes you'll have abilities, and we'll get into that shortly. Sometimes like the units themselves will have plays when they enter play, for example, or when they attack, or when they're defeated. We'll go into that a little bit further, but I just wanted to explain that ground units and space units can attack each other in most circumstances. There are some cards that allow you to get around that. All right, so we went here. We're going to cover an ability essentially here. So this unit is Leia Organa. She comes with the starter or the special 2 player. And we'll notice here, she's going to cost 2 to play. She is also a unit. We can see that just to the right of the cost. And to the right of that, she's a ground unit. So she would go in the ground arena. She's got 2 power. That's how much damage she'll do when she attacks. And she's got blue toughness, 2 hit points to the right of that in the blue there. She has the traits Rebel and Official. And we'll notice here in her text box in the middle, it says, when played, either ready a resource or exhaust a unit. So essentially what this will mean, if you've played her for your first turn, for your first play on that phase, if your opponent doesn't have anything that is ready, you can ready one of your resources. And essentially, if you've got something that costs 1, that would allow you to then play something that costs 1. In this case, it says either ready a resource or exhaust a unit. This would work on your opponent's cards as well too, if you so chose to do so. Most cases, Leia, people will exhaust a unit, and that's generally after the first turn when something is able to attack, which we're going to go over shortly. So again, this is just zoomed in, and it just focuses more on the when played. Some abilities are going to have things that let you search, and they're going to be based off of the traits that we spoke about in the middle. This is Grand Moff Tarkin. I don't have the full art. I just did the text box for this one. But we can see when you play this unit, it allows you to search the top 5 cards of your deck for up to 2 Imperial cards, reveal them, and draw them. So essentially what you do is when you play this guy, you take the top 5 cards of your deck. You'd look for anything that has the Imperial trait, such as this unit here. You can see right in the middle, Imperial. You can take those 2 units, and then we would have to show them to our opponent just to confirm here that those are both indeed Imperial units. And then you would shuffle the remaining cards and put them on the bottom of your deck. And then that's basically resolving this card. And so that's partially where traits come into play. So the traits do come into play. Some cards will specifically call out Imperial or Rebel, First Order, Separatist, different types of things that are in Star Wars. So I wanted to go over the unique aspect here as well too. So on this card, I've highlighted C3PO. You see the name C3PO? There's a little symbol just to the left of the C. That is a unique identifier. And basically what that means is you can only have one unit in play with the same name. Now, there is a distinction here. Later you can have, we're going to go over this in just a moment, but if you play a second unit, and pictured here, the exact same title, what you would need to do if you play two, so you have this one in play, in this example it's got damage on it, and we'll go over that in a moment. If you've played a second one that's exactly the same, you'd have to choose one and discard it. So you can only have one in play if it's got this symbol on it, the one next to the C. And basically that just denotes that you can only have one unique character with the same name and play at a time. Now in this example, I just wanted to cover and Leia Organa. You notice that these are different cards. Underneath where it says Leia Organa on the left card, it's got the title Defiant Princess. And on the right, it says Alliance General. You can have more than one Leia Organa in play. If they have different traits, different names, if they're not the same card, they can both exist. But at any point, if you play a second of the same exact kind, one becomes discarded. Okay, so now we're going to get back to our event option here. So in this case, if you have the card Repair in your hand, you'll notice this card has a cost of 1. Underneath the word Repair, we're going to see Supply. That is this card's trait. So if you have something, a unit later that says look at the top 5 cards and look for a supply, it would target this card. Essentially, you could search for it. Now what we would do if we wanted to play this card, we're going to go over damage again very shortly. We would pay the 1 in the gold box in the upper left, and then we would do what it says in the text box here. Heal 3 damage from a unit or base. We're going to go over damage shortly. Once we have done this, that card's going to go right into your discard pile, and it's done essentially from there. Upgrades. Upgrades are cards that pretty certain only go on units, but I may be wrong on that. There may be some things that go onto other upgrades, but in this case, we're going to notice this card is called Resilient, and we'll see in the upper left-hand corner it costs 1. If we look on the bottom of this, we're going to see the traits, and again see the name of the card on the bottom. It says Resilient, and then underneath it, it says Innate. That's the trait for this upgrade. And we'll notice on the left here, we see +0 in red, and to the right it says +3. Those are going to modify the stats of your units that are in play. So if we go here to this photo, let's say we played previously this Rogue Operative card. Let's say that we want to play this Resilient card on that. We would pay our 1 resource. So again, we would have our resource in the bottom row. You'd want to exhaust the resource, turn it horizontally, and then we'd want to put it underneath our unit. So now in this case, we're going to add the values. Sometimes the values are negative and we'll subtract them, but that's going to be obvious on the card when you play it. So in this case, the Rogue Operative would get +0 power, so it will remain 2. To the right of that, we're going to add +3 to our hit points. So this Rogue Operative would now be treated as a 2/7, meaning it would deal 2 damage and would be able to take up to 7 damage before it's defeated. So some action abilities on units have exhaust as an example. You see on the text of this card here, it says action, and it's got that symbol where it's an arrow pointing to a direction. That symbol is the standard symbol for exhaust. And again, just to keep you up to date, exhaust means from putting it in this direction to this direction. Now you may be asking yourself too, we keep talking about how we're in this direction or this direction. How do we go from one to the other. That's going to come into the next phase. I'm going to explain that. I don't want you to think that I'm just glazing over something or skipping over something. We're going to discuss how things become ready after we go over everything in the action phase. I just want to explain what each thing does, and then we'll kind of progress with the turn. So in this case, this unit has an ability where it's action exhausted. So we're going to turn it horizontally. Now this one says, play an Imperial unit from your hand. It enters play ready. Each opponent may ready a unit. So essentially in this case, what we would do is we would, once this unit is ready, we can exhaust it. We can take any Imperial card that's in our hand of cards and we can put it into play. Instead of it coming into play exhausted, it's going to come into play ready. So it's going to come in vertically, which means you would be able to use it right away. So if it has an action ability like this card does, you would be able to use that for your next action. Or you could attack, which we're going to go over that in just a moment. And I just wanted to delineate the difference between enters play, action abilities, and things of that nature. So this is basically what it's going to look like once we have exhausted our Admiral Ozzel, where we have the full picture of it. Just to show you what it looks like. Okay, so we've covered pretty much everything as far as units go. We're going to discuss the leader abilities. So in this case, we're going to discuss the Luke Skywalker leader. So we'll notice on this leader, you see where it says the word action just to the right of the photo here. It's got a number 1 and the exhaust symbol, and it says give a shield token to and it's got a symbol there. That's the heroism symbol. We're going to discuss aspects shortly. To a unit you played this turn. So essentially what that means is we're going to, leaders have an ability where generally they become exhausted and they'll do something, and they're used once a turn. We'll also notice on the bottom, epic action. This is going to be something that we're going to discuss later on, where we can take our leader and put it into play as a unit. Now to discuss aspects, since this one shows an aspect after it says give a shield token to a heroism unit in this case, but if you've noticed too, to the right here of Luke Skywalker, you see how it's got a blue circle underneath where the thumb is, and then there's this gold or white looking symbol. Those are called aspects, and those are very important for deck building in this game. These are the different types of aspects that we've got for this game, and I'm going to start from left to right. The number 5, the symbol here all the way on the left, that is the heroism symbol. And I'm going to skip just a little bit because we're going to go to the opposite side here. The black one, that is the villainy, all the way on the right with a number 3. So in this game, I tend to not consider heroism and villainy to be their own aspects. The other 4 generally will have either a hero or villainy side to them. So they're the good guys versus the bad guys, if you want to look at it that way. Some units don't have a hero or villainy, they're just neutral. But they're more like a modifier, in my opinion. They're still considered aspects. And back with this example for Luke, this is basically going to say you can put a shield token on a heroism unit that you played this turn. Note that he has that same symbol to the right of his name underneath that blue. He's also this type. And that's going to be important for deck construction later. So proceeding with the remainder, where the number 4 is, that blue symbol, that is vigilance. To the right of that, the green symbol is going to be command. To the right of that, the red symbol is going to be aggression. To the right of that, the yellow symbol is going to be cunning. And once again, to the right of that, that symbol is going to be called villainy. Deck construction is very important. Well, notice in this example, this is the start of combat, but I just wanted to give you a real quick rundown about deck construction. If we go back to Luke, you see those the blue symbol and the white symbol. So we know that those are heroism and vigilance. You don't need to remember them. Most people will just say blue-white in this example. Those become important because while you're building your deck, see in this example, Luke is on the bottom and he's exhausted. But you'll notice the base, Administrator's Tower. Let me see if I can zoom in. That's got the yellow symbol to the right of its name. So what that means is this deck can play cards from the blue, the white, or yellow. And we're going to go over that in a little bit more detail. So it's going to allow you to play any of those types of cards because your leader has it or your base has it. And again, we're going to go over that in a little bit more detail, but I just wanted to give you a general idea of how decks are constructed, essentially. So now we're going to skip ahead and go into combat. This is with units. And essentially what will happen is after your first turn, there's going to be a regroup phase, and then all of your resources and all of your units will become ready. They'll go back, they'll go to the vertical position, this orientation. And the picture here below, we can see the Alliance X-Wing, the TIE Fighter, the Probe Droid, and the Snow Trooper. In this example, those units are all in the ready position, which means that you can either use any abilities that they have, or you can attack with them. So in this example, we're going to say that this fleet lieutenant, sorry, I was just trying to look at the name, is decided to attack. When you attack, you can either choose to fight a base, or you can fight another unit that's already in play. For this example, we're going to say that the fleet lieutenant is going to be attacking your opponent's base. We're going to also assume that we're Luke in this example. Now we're going to notice that the fleet lieutenant has an upgrade on it. We'll zoom in and we'll see that it's got +1 to attack, so it's 4, and +1 to defense, so it's 4 power and 4 defense. So the unit will go from vertical. You're going to say, I'll attack your base. You'll exhaust your unit. Whenever you decide to attack, your units become exhausted. And in this case, your opponent's going to take those damage tokens that we showed you at the start, or you could use a dice, whatever is easiest for you, and you're going to put 4 damage counters on your opponent's base, or they're going to put them on their base. And essentially, once your opponent has, in this case, 30 damage on their base, they would lose the game. Now, one thing to note is, again, ground units can only fight other ground units. They can't fight units that are in space and vice versa. Now, coincidentally, units in any arena, so units in space or ground, can attack the base. You don't have to be in a specific arena to attack your opponent's base. So as an example in this, you can attack with your fleet lieutenant and attack your opponent's base, or you can use your Alliance X-Wing and attack your opponent's base. You don't have to be on a specific side to attack an opponent's base. Now, again, that's one way to beat your opponent, is to match the damage printed on their base to defeat them. So again, in this case, if we look at the command center, we'll see the number 30, which means this base can take 30 damage before it's defeated. Now let's say we wanted to fight one of the units instead. Let's back up. Now we're going to just assume that your fleet lieutenant was ready. We started a new turn, and you wanted to attack your opponent's, let me get the right name here, Viper Probe Droid, okay? Which is going to be this Imperial Black unit over here. Let's say that you want to attack that. We're going to exhaust your unit. One thing to note too, it doesn't matter if your opponent's units are ready or exhausted. You can attack them in either configuration. It doesn't matter. So let's say that your fleet lieutenant attacks that probe droid. Okay, what happens? So now the probe droid, if we look at its power and its defense, it's got a red 3, which is it deals 3 damage, and it can take 2. Now the fleet lieutenant on the bottom, we determined already that this has been upgraded. It's got 4 attack because it's got 3 on the printed card and 1 from the upgrade. And it's got 4 hit points available, 3 printed and 1 from the upgrade, which means it's going to deal 4 damage and it can take up to 4 damage. So in this example, we're going to deal the 4 damage. In this case, we see the 4 damage tokens, 1 damage each. Those are going to be placed on each unit. This one is going to deal, the Viper probe droid is going to deal 3 back to the fleet lieutenant. And then the fleet lieutenant is going to deal the 4 damage there. So now obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously. If you're not familiar with card games, you may not be aware. However, the 4 damage is enough to defeat that Viper probe droid. 2 would have been enough. So what would happen is you would take all the damage units, damage tokens off of this unit, and it would go into your discard or your opponent's discard pile and would be defeated. One thing to note here is the 3 damage that your fleet lieutenant takes will stay on it. Damage does not go away in this game. So this basically symbolizes a unit being, let's say, shot with a blaster, for example, and having damage and just coping with that damage for the remainder of the game until it's defeated. So we're going to go over some of the keywords, and I'm going to just highlight what's known as evergreen keywords. And these are keywords that are recycled for every set. Most sets will have these to some capacity in them. We're going to start off with the term shield or shielded. If we went back to so we had these tokens at the start of the game, and I said I was going to explain them. Okay, so we've got an experience token and we've got a shield token. A shield token, basically, if something grants the ability of placing a shield on a unit that you have, you're going to take, there are plastic tokens that are sold separately. These token upgrades will also come with your starters. And you can use whichever you prefer, or a different dice. Maybe you want a blue dice, as long as both you and your opponent are familiar with the fact that it's a shield. You would place a shield on it, and what a shield means is the next time the unit with a shield would take damage, you would instead remove the shield token from it. So we'll go back to this example. Let's say that the probe droid had a shield on it when you attacked. Instead of the 4 damage going on the probe droid, we would instead remove the shield token, and then that probe droid would take no damage. Some units will be referred to as shielded, and what that means is it comes into play and has a shield on it. There's also something called experience. We'll see cards that say put an experience token on a unit, and essentially that's a token upgrade that grants +1 to its attack and +1 to its defense for each token that's on it. There's a keyword called raid. Now raid is going to be followed with a number. So let's say a unit has raid 1. What that's going to mean is when that unit attacks, it gets +1 to its attack and +0 to its hit points, to its defense. So in this case, let's say that this unit had raid 1. When it attacks, it would get +1 to its attack, which would make it a 4 attacker, 4 power, and 3 defense. And that only counts just while it's attacking. So if it's being attacked itself, it won't get that. It only counts when the unit itself is attacking. So another evergreen keyword called grit. Grit essentially means that it gets +1, +0 for each damage that's on the unit. So if we go back to this previous example, let's assume that our fleet lieutenant on the bottom has the grit keyword. It doesn't, but we're going to just say that it does. In this case, since it has 3 damage on it, it would get +1, +0 for each damage on it. So it doesn't matter if it's attacking or defending, it would get +3/+0. In this case, the unit is already a 4/4, 4 attack, 4 defense. It would be considered a 7/4 since it has 3 damage on it, and that's grit. So for overwhelm, we're going to use the same example. There's an overwhelm keyword, and we can actually see that on the 1st Legion Stormtrooper. Overwhelm means that any excess damage that would be dealt to a unit is going to be instead dealt to its base. So in this same example, if it's attacking that same Viper probe droid on the top there, that probe droid has 3 power, 3 attack, and 2 defense, 2 hit points. If the Fleet Lieutenant had the Overwhelm keyword, it would deal 4 damage to the Viper probe droid, and since 2 is enough to defeat that unit, the remaining 2 would carry over to the opponent's base. So your opponent would then defeat the Viper probe droid and deal 2 damage to their base if it had the Overwhelm keyword. Now we're going to get to Sentinel, which is this photo, and this is my favorite keyword. Sentinel is pretty great because this is for people who are more defensive oriented. Sentinel means units in this arena can't attack your non-Sentinel units or your base. So this has to be attacked. In this case, this is a ground unit. Your opponent has to attack a Sentinel unit if it exists. Sentinels can be on space units, they can be on ground units, they can be on either arena or any type of unit. Sentinel is basically a way to avoid damage on your base, and it must be attacked. There's no way, well, there is a way around it. We're going to get to that with the next type, but I love this card. It's my personal favorite keyword. And we'll see the keyword here in the text box, Sentinel, where it does explain it. Some of the cards will explain what the ability does. Over here, this is our Rebel Pathfinder, and this one has the Saboteur keyword on it, which is what we're going to cover next. Now, it's pretty much the opposite of our Sentinel. Saboteur says, when this unit attacks, you can ignore Sentinel, and if you're attacking an opposing unit, you can defeat any number of the defending, you defeat all of the defender's shields. So if we're attacking a unit and it had 1 or 2 shields on it, you would defeat all the shields on it. You also can ignore Sentinel with Saboteur units. One thing I wanted to go back over with shields, just to clarify, a unit can have any number of shields on it. So you could have 2 or 3 shields on a unit. And the way that would work would be the next time a unit would take damage, you would remove 1 of those shields, and it would keep any number of them left on there. In this case, if your Saboteur attacked a unit that had 2 shields, you'd defeat both of the shields, and then you would deal your damage normally, which is pretty great. A lot of aggressive decks really like this keyword. Restore is a keyword that can go on ground units, it can go on space units, and it's going to be followed by a number. So in this case, this is going to be for the card's not shown fully, but it's a restored arc fighter. It's a space unit that costs 2, it's a 2/3, and it has restore 1. And as we can see in the text in the box here, it says, when this unit attacks, heal 1 damage from your base. New with set 5, there is a keyword called hidden, and the gist of hidden is if the unit with hidden enters play, it cannot be attacked by other units until the next phase. And that's it. So it guarantees that your units can't get attacked. It doesn't mean that they're going to survive because your opponent may have something such as an event that says defeat a unit. So it's good against other decks that are playing lots of units, and it's a good way to save your units essentially. One other thing I wanted to highlight is on attack abilities and when defeated abilities. I know that we briefly touched on this, but some units will have on attack abilities, meaning when this unit attacks, you do what it says in the box. So in this instance, this unit says on attack, you can exhaust an enemy ground unit. And one of the simple things about this game that I really enjoy is Anything that says enemy is referring to your opponents. Anything that says friendly refers to your units. So in this case, if this unit is attacking, it says exhaust an enemy vehicle unit. Let's say that this is a vehicle. You just simply exhaust when defeated. Some units will have a when defeated ability, and this just basically means once it goes to your discard pile. In this case, this is called a super laser technician, but you'll notice it's got 2 attack and 1 defense. So when this dies, it says when defeated, you may put this unit into play as a resource and ready it. So this goes back to the beginning of the game where we can take 2 cards from our hand, you put one down, or put them down, and you can use those to pay for the cost of your cards. This essentially will allow you to put an extra resource into your resource row. And as soon as we get to the regroup phase, we'll describe how you can get additional resources beyond that. All right, so taking the initiative is an ability that you have in this game. And that's going to denote the player that's going to go first in the round. Essentially, what you can do is you can forfeit all of your remaining actions and claim the initiative. This means that it guarantees that you will go first in the next round. So some people will call it a turn. The next turn, you are going to take the first action when you claim the initiative. Why is that good? Let's say you have an 8 power attacker in play and your opponent has 8 hit points left on their base. If you claim initiative, they either have to kill your unit before you take your turn, or you're going to just attack and win the game. There's a lot of strategy with taking the initiative. And so that's going to be something that you'll need to learn how to use, essentially, to make the best use out of that. There's also something called passing. If you don't want to do anything or you want to wait for your opponent to do something, you can pass. And what that means is, let's say your opponent plays a unit and you've got something in your hand that you'd rather wait until they have 2 units in play. So you can say, I pass. What that means is you skip your action and your opponent may now take in another action. So again, this is all, turns are back and forth. I do something, you do something. So if you pass, let's say your opponent attacks with a unit and then you pass. Then they attack with another unit, you pass. Then they play something else, and then you go, aha, I'm going to play my card that defeats every unit in play. I just wanted you to put more things into play. Again, it's a strategic thing. Also, with taking the initiative, it's very important to note, since you're foregoing the rest of your actions for that turn, your opponent can do things until they're done. So if they've got 2 other units they want to play, or they have other units they can attack with, they could just continue to take action after action after action, since you're now unable to do so since you've claimed the initiative. So again, it's a very strategic thing, whether you want to do that or not. So now let's say you've taken the initiative, your opponent's done everything. The only thing that they can do is pass. Now we're going to get to the regroup phase. This is where we're able to add resources. During the regroup phase, each player is going to draw 2 cards from the top of their deck. They're going to choose up to 1 card from their hand and put it face down, horizontally, and play as a resource. You can choose not to play a resource if you want. I don't usually recommend that until later in the game. Aggressive decks usually will start to hold on to their cards once the 4 or 5 resource turn. And then once you've decided if you're going to put a resource down from your hand or not, then everything readies. What that means is your resources will ready, your units will ready, and your leaders are going to ready. So anything that is currently exhausted will become ready. And from there, you just go back and forth. You continue taking turns until a base is defeated, or your opponent runs out of cards. And I believe that we're going to go over that a little bit later. So now we're going to go over the epic action on a leader. Notice before we had Luke and we saw his action where he could put a shield unit on a heroic unit that entered play this turn. We're going to look at Darth Vader in this case. You'll notice it says epic action. See where it's highlighted on green? This says if you control 7 or more resources, deploy this leader, flip him, ready him, and move him to the ground arena. Once you have 7 resources in play, you can put him into play as a unit. Okay, so the backside of Darth Vader, essentially he would come into play as a leader. In this case, it shows what his power toughness is, and I apologize I didn't grab a screenshot of it, but he's a 5'8 leader, and when he attacks, he can deal 2 damage to a unit. That can be ground or space, it doesn't matter. So the thing with leaders is, let's say you've got 7 total resources in play, and you wanted to activate Darth Vader's ability. You can do so. His ability in this case says you can pay 1 and exhaust him. If you've played a villainy card this phase, deal 1 damage to a unit and 1 damage to a base. Okay, so let's say that we've done that, and you have 7 resources. You can deploy your Darth Vader. Essentially, you would flip him over to the other side. So if he's on his leader side, let's say, you'd flip him over to his leader side. And in this case, he is a ground leader. You'd put him in the ground arena. And he does not enter, leaders don't enter play exhausted. Leaders always enter ready. And that bears repeating, just to preface that. Leaders always enter play ready. You don't have to pay any cost to put a leader into play. This one, as long as you've got 7 resources or more, you can put him directly into play. Okay, how to win the game. So as we discussed before, you can deal damage equal to the opponent's hit points on their base to defeat them. Another way that you can defeat them is running your opponent out of cards. The way Star Wars Unlimited works is if you have no cards left in your deck, every time that you would draw a card and you have no cards left in your deck, you instead take 3 damage per card that you cannot draw. Sometimes decks can mitigate that downside with restore units. There's a leader called Rey, which is not listed here, but when she attacks, she can restore 3, meaning she would be able to heal 3 damage off of your base. So that kind of mitigates the downside of it. Essentially, you would never be able to play any new cards, just whatever is left in your hand. But anytime that you would draw a card and you don't have any left in your deck, you take 3 damage per card. Again, remember in the regroup phase, you always start by drawing 2 cards. That's part of every single turn. So that would mean 6 damage per turn if you're completely out of cards. The other option is, as I said, dealing damage to your opponent's base equal to the printed value. In this case, Command Center has 30. So if you can get 30 damage on that base, you would then win the game. There is a way to tie the game. If both bases reach their threshold at the same time, it's considered a draw. Now we're going to go over aspect penalties, which this is one of my favorite parts of the game, and I think it's very, very good. We discussed this very briefly earlier, but the aspects on Luke Skywalker and your base, over here on the left, you'll notice, to the right of Luke Skywalker's name, the blue vigilance symbol, and beneath that, the white heroism symbol. Those are the aspects on Luke Skywalker. To the right of that and underneath Luke is the base. This is Administrator's Tower, and you see the yellow cunning symbol. That means that this deck, this Luke Skywalker's leader and base, can have any cards of those 3 aspects. So the blue, the yellow, or the white. You can play any of those. Now, if we look at Chewbacca, let's say you're considering using this Chewbacca card in your deck. See how it's got the yellow symbol that matches your base, and it's got the heroism symbol underneath that, and that matches Luke. So you can play Chewbacca in a Luke Skywalker deck with this base, and there's no penalty. And what do I mean by no penalty? In this next example, we're going to say we've got a Darth Vader deck, the same base, the Administrator's Tower. Now you'll notice the aspects are different than Luke's. To the right of Darth Vader, we've got the red aggression symbol, and underneath that, we've got the black villainy symbol. Those are Darth Vader's aspects, your leader. To the right of that is the same base, and we're going to say that you're playing a Darth Vader yellow deck in this case. So you've got a yellow base, and to the right of that, we've got the yellow cunning symbol. Now we'll compare that with Chewbacca. Does this combination of Darth Vader and Administrator's Tower have these same two? So we've got the yellow, so cunning, yes, but heroism, Darth Vader does not have that. So now it doesn't mean that you can't play this Chewbacca and this combination of base and leader. You would just have to pay a penalty of 2. So every time the aspect does not match, there's a 2 cost penalty. Essentially, that would make Chewbacca cost 7 to play instead of the 5 in the upper left that it would normally cost. It would cost 7. Now in this next example, we're going to say that we're using a green base with Darth Vader, and none of Chewbacca's aspects match. Well, now that would make it cost 9 because it doesn't, the Vader and base combo don't match either of Chewbacca's aspects, and it's a 2-point penalty per aspect. So instead of costing 5, it would now cost 9. And so in this way, you can play cards from any aspect. It's just going to come down to if you think it's worth playing them in your deck with that cost. Sometimes it's worth it to you, sometimes it's not, and that's going to come down to deck building. So that's the gist of everything as far as deck building goes. From here on out, I'm going to go over just different rarities, and we're going to get into a couple other things. So if you have any questions, feel free to just mention them down below in the comments as far as gameplay goes. But yeah, you can put anything you want in your deck. There are going to be penalties for putting cards out of aspect. As far as the decks themselves, decks have to be at least 50 cards. There's one base and one leader. You can have a 10 card sideboard, so those can be played after the first game. And most tournaments, there's a best of 3 where you play one game. After that first game is finished, you can take cards out of your main deck and put cards from your sideboard deck into your main deck. So you can either take out 2 cards from your main deck and put 2 cards in, or if you want, you can just take all 10 of your sideboard cards and put them into your main deck. We'll go over that in just a moment here. But I wanted to discuss the rarities of cards. Because a lot of decks, once they show you how to play the game, that's kind of where everything ends. And I want to give you a little bit better idea. When you're opening up packs or starter decks, special decks, spotlight decks, they're going to have rarity symbols. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this or not, but on the bottom corner there is a white symbol with a U, and that means uncommon. I'm going to show you some in some screenshots here. So in this example, see we've got an S. If you see this symbol, that card just comes in the spotlight decks or the 2-player starters. People will refer to them as either starter or special, but they only come in the 2-player starter or the spotlight decks that are meant for 2 players. And when a set is released, there's usually a light side and a dark side deck that are set up as spotlight decks. There's also common. You'll notice on the bottom here, this is going to be a common card. See the C, it's like a bronze color. We've got an uncommon. These are all basically ascending, going from least to most. After uncommons, we have the rarity. It's going to be gold. And Star Wars Unlimited has what's called legendary, which is blue. It's a blue L. It's a little bit difficult to see here. I'm sorry, I got a bad picture of it. But legendaries are the highest tier rarity that you can get out of a pack or a starter. And those are usually some of the higher, sometimes you get a not so great legendary, but those exist. There's not much you can do about it. Now, card types, this is for collectors primarily. We've got, in this example, I've got a hyperspace card. We'll notice on the bottom here, this is a legendary card, and hyperspace means borderless. And you can see where the border normally is. If we go back to this example, see how there's a black border around the cards? In this example, there's no border since this is a hyperspace card. Sometimes you'll get one or two hyperspace cards in a pack. Sometimes you'll get multiples. You can get foil cards, which just basically have the shiny treatment to them. This can be usually in regular packs, you're going to get one of these. The special editions or collector boosters in Star Wars Unlimited, they're called Carbonite. Basically, most of the pack is going to consist of foils. We also have hyperspace foils where it's both the borderless and now there's going to also be showcases where I know that I grabbed one and I meant to show you. This is my favorite leader. This is Chancellor Palpatine. This is what they normally look like. And his on the back he's kind of weird. He's got 2 leaders. Now a showcase, you'll know them as soon as you open them because they're going to stand out. They look very different from everything else. This is Cassian Andor, but this is a showcase version of Chancellor Palpatine. So if you take a look at this and you compare it to this, big difference. This one stands out quite a bit. This Cassian, that was the back, and this is what the front looks like. All right, so that is a prestige. Now that's a showcase. Showcases are usually 1 in 12 boxes, so they're very difficult to get. You do have the ability to buy them on the second-hand market from LGS or online store, but we're just going over the different types for now. The Carbonite packs have what's called a Prestige card. Prestige cards are going to be 1 per pack. In this case, I've got the Darth Vader Prestige card. These can only be found in the Carbonite packs as of the recording of this video, 1 per pack. Carbonate boxes have 12 packs. Original or regular boxes have 24 packs in them. The Carbonate packs contain almost all foil cards or hyperspace foil. In the middle, there's 1 Prestige. And Prestige cards come in 3 different variants. There's the standard, which we're seeing here. There's a foil version, which basically is the same thing as this, but with a foil treatment. That's called Tier 2. And then Tier 3 Prestige is serialized. And you'll see that we've got a number over here, and it'll be 1 of 250 or 2 of 250. Other different types of cards are play promos. For playing in weekly tournaments, you'll get a pack. The packs look something like this, and they contain 3 cards. And most of the new play packs come in something that looks like this. And again, you open them up, and depending on how you do, or all tournaments are different, but they're going to always have 3 cards in them. This is a play promo of a Death Star Stormtrooper. Now, normally this card is a common, but since it comes into play, it's got the rare symbol on it. It's not really a rare, but you can get normal and foil cards in that. There's also convention exclusives. This is the convention exclusive for 2024, so last year's convention exclusives. Again, as of recording this is the 2nd year of Star Wars Unlimited, and we have 5 sets. Legends of the Force just came out. That is our 5th set. This was for sets 1, 2, and 3. And this is a card that was inside of that. The treatments vary. How they look are different. Essentially, this is just an example of what you get. There are also judge promos, which I took a screenshot of an online seller showing what some of the judge promotional cards look like. They usually just say the word judge on them somewhere, and they have a different treatment. And then lastly, we have event exclusives. These are the ones, just a screenshot I found of some of these. There's some, for example, the Vader and the Luke on the left, those are hyperspace versions of the set 1 leaders. The only way that you could get those with the first set was by going to, I believe it was PAX East, and you could get those, and it was just something that Final Fantasy Flight was giving away. These other ones, the Grogu and the Darth Tyrannus, are given away at events. So if you go to Gen Con or you go to some other event, they may be giving out one of these special event exclusives. And those are the different types of cards. So we're getting towards the end of this. As I said at the start, you have to have at least 50 cards by the default. You can't have any more than 3 of any one certain card. You can have a 10-card sideboard where you can exchange cards in between games, and you need to have 1 leader and 1 base. Just as a quick rule, you can't have a different base or leader in your sideboard and switch your leader to a different leader in between games. That always has to stay the same. As far as formats, there's 4 currently that are available. There's Premier. The way Premier works is going to be 6 sets. Anything in those 6 sets is going to be legal. Once the 7th set comes out, sets 1, 2, and 3 will rotate out, which means they will no longer be available to play in Premier. So once set 7 comes out, the cards that are legal in Premier are going to be sets 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then sets 8 and 9 will come out, and then once set 10 comes out, sets 4 through 6 will rotate out, and so on and so forth. They'll keep cycling out. Twin Suns is another format where you can have 2 leaders, the same heroic or villainy alliance team up. Essentially, they both have to either both be heroic or both be villainy, and 1 base, and it's a singleton format, meaning you can only have 1 card of each type in a deck. So you're playing 1 deck of 80 cards, can only be 1 of each card. You've got 2 leaders and 1 base, and that's the gist of it. Eternal is going to be a non-rotating format, which is going to mean that cards from every set are going to be playable in Eternal. So once we get to set 8, 9, 10, and cards rotate out of the Premier format, they'll all still be available in Eternal. And there's a new format that just came out called Trilogy. And Trilogy is kind of interesting. The summary of it is you make 3 decks. You can't have more than 3 of any one card between those 3 decks. So let's say you've got the Death Star Stormtrooper, the promo that we looked at earlier. If you have 3 of them in one of your decks, that means you can't put them in any of your other decks. You can only have 3 of any one specific card amongst your 3 decks. In Trilogy, your opponent will pick a card that they want to ban, which means you just can't use it. And then you play a best 2 out of 3. So if you play your opponent, you beat them, and then they beat you, then the last 2 decks standing play each other, and whoever wins that match. Places to buy. There's a couple places that you can go. Your local game store, probably your best bet. You can call them, and I usually recommend going to them first. There are online stores such as tcgplayer.com or Cool Stuff Inc. So anyway, there is a Star Wars Unlimited website. Fantasy Flight has a website where you can look at cards. There's a deck filtering thing where you can search for cards as well too. There's SWUDB where you can build decks. They have sets, rules, all listed there. There's also sw-unlimited-db.com, which is a collection manager, and it's got a deck builder. And there's also melee.gg where you can register for tournaments and check how you've done. So sorry for the real quick recording here, but just wanted to give you a brief overview of how to play the game, how to determine rarities, things of that nature, the different formats, how to build a deck, things of that nature. If you have any other questions about how to play the game, certainly feel free to leave them below, and I'll be glad to respond. Thanks so much for watching. I know it's a little bit of a long video, but I hope that you have a very good rest of your day. Thanks again. Take care.